We're ready to go.
Okay. Well, I would now like to call the November 19th, 2025 Longmont Sustainability Advisory Board meeting to order. Could we please start with the roll call?
Yes, Robert Davidson,
I'm here.
Corkit Oneron,
Here.
Ethan Augreen,
Here.
Alex Solomeo,
Here.
Jeff Garrick,
Here.
Alyssa Harding,
Here.
Daniel Leonard,
Here.
Lisa Knobloch,
Here.
Becky Doyle is here somewhere, I think. Susan Bartlett,
Here.
Heather McIntyre is here. We have Francie Jaffe and Daryl Hahn with us today as well. Councilmember Popkin will be joining us shortly and potentially another couple of community members. But Chair, you have a quorum.
All right. Well, thank you, Heather. I'll start off by reading our land acknowledgement statement. We acknowledge that Longmont sits on the traditional territory of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, and other indigenous peoples. We honor the history and the living and spiritual connection that the first peoples have with this land. It's our commitment to face the injustices that happened when the land was taken and to educate our communities, ourselves, and our children to ensure that these injustices do not happen again. In our inclusion statement, the Sustainability Advisory Board embraces diverse perspectives from its members and the public. To create an inclusive space where everyone feels welcome to share their opinion, the board asks that all attendees listen and speak with respect and avoid attacks on individuals or specific group identities. The next item up on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Did anyone have any changes or corrections that needed to be made? All right. Well, seeing none, is there a motion to approve them as presented?
I motion to approve as presented.
Okay. Thanks,
Second.
Alyssa. Thank you,
Yeah, I can
Corkit.
second.
Okay. All those in favor?
All right.
Who is the
See
second
everybody
on that
there?
one?
I
Jeff.
think,
Okay,
sure. There we go.
thank you.
I think that was a unanimous approval there. I saw everyone vote in favor, so we're good to go. In terms of agenda revisions, Lisa or staff, is there anyone that anything we need to bring up there beyond what's already on the agenda?
No agenda revisions, just an FYI, I have to head out a few minutes before 6, but other folks will be stepping in for me.
Okay, perfect. Well, that takes us to general business, and our item there is an update from the Platte River Power Authority and Longmont Power Communications. So I think Kendall and Susan, you've got that. So I will let you take the ball from here.
Thanks. Appreciate that, Robert. And we've got a slide deck to share with you today. So I'm Susan Bartlett. I'm the Director of Energy Strategies and Solutions, Longmont Power and Communications. And joining me is Kendall Perez, and she's the Senior Manager of Strategic Communications, Community Relations, and Public Education at Platte River Power Authority. We're glad to have her with us tonight. Also, we have Daryl Hahn, who's joined us. He's Longmont's Director of Electric Services, and he's a Platte River board member. You can go to the next screen. So LPC and Platte River were at your June meeting, and we talked specifically about distributed energy resources and virtual power plants at that meeting. But we wanted to take a step back today and provide more of an overview of Platte River, especially for those of you who are newer members to the board. So Kendall is going to talk about governance, vision, mission, values, as well as the resource diversification plan, and also just progress on some goals and some 2025 highlights. Then I'll give you some updates on the virtual power plant work. And then Kendall's going to talk a little bit about the 2028 IRP planning process and also a public education campaign that's underway. And I'll wrap us up with just some highlights, local highlights for 2025, as well as kind of what we're thinking about where our efforts are going to be in 2026, as well as our commitment to engagement and education. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Kendall.
Thank you, Susan. Good afternoon, board. It's my pleasure to be here to present to you about Platte River. Next slide, please. So for those of you who are new to the board and might not know too much about Platte River, this section is for you. I'll go over our governance as well as our vision, mission, and values. Next slide, please. So the Longmont community, together with Estes Park, Fort Collins, and Loveland, created Platte River back in 1973 to provide wholesale electric generation and transmission to their communities. We continue to be a community-owned public power utility, and we help you all serve a little over 350,000 customers. Since our inception, we have prioritized providing reliable, environmentally responsible, and financially sustainable energy and services to your communities. These serve as our core pillars, and you'll hear them come up again and again in this presentation. We have a little over 300 employees between our headquarters office in Fort Collins and up at our power plant, which is north of Wellington, called the Rawhide Energy Station. Next slide, please. So our board of directors is comprised of 2 representatives from each community. The mayor is automatically part of our board upon election, though they may designate someone from their council to serve in their stead. The mayor essentially represents the will of the people on our board. And then the other representative is appointed by the city council. This has often been the utility director that is appointed. They bring technical expertise to the board, but other times it's been a council member or a member of the city manager's office. As you all know, you have a new mayor, and there are 2 new mayors in our other communities as well. So we expect early next year to have 3 new board members. Next slide, please. So a quick overview of our vision, mission, and values. Our vision as a public power provider, we strive to be a respected leader and a responsible provider of electricity to improve our region's economic vibrancy and quality of life, with an aim to be as efficient and sustainable as possible. Our mission, as I mentioned earlier, we want to be a leader in the energy space while maintaining those 3 pillars of reliability, environmental responsibility, and financial sustainability. As you would expect, safety is a core value at Platte River, given that we provide a public health and safety service. Other values that we hold dear are integrity, service, respect, operational excellence, sustainability, and innovation. Next slide, please. So these next couple of slides, again, might be repeat for those of you who have been on the board for a while and know who we are, but do help provide context for where we're heading as a utility. So this is an evolution of our generation resources. So when we began in 1973, we actually had a non-carbon resource portfolio made up entirely of federal hydropower. And those were the allocations pooled by our owner communities when they formed us. We then purchased shares of 2 coal units at Craig Generating Station. So we are partners in those shares or in those units with other Colorado utilities. Both of these units are set to retire by 2030. We then built our own coal-fired power plant, Rawhide Unit 1, began commercial operation in '84. It was originally designed to add 2 more coal units to that site, but our future had other plans. In '98, we became the first utility in Colorado to provide wind energy to our customers through the Medicine Bow project. That project was actually decommissioned just last year. And then in the early 2000s, due to a significant growth in summer peak as a result of widespread adoption of air conditioning, we installed some natural gas-fired combustion turbine units. So instead of installing baseload resources like coal, which run continuously, these units were determined to be more effective at meeting that unique load. Next slide, please. Between 2009 and 2016, we installed several non-carbon energy projects, so 2 wind projects, and then our first utility-scale solar project up at Rawhide Energy Station. In 2018, it really marked a turning point for Platte River when our board passed the resource diversification policy. Next slide. So I won't read through all of this, but essentially the resource diversification policy supports our owner community's clean energy goals. It directs our CEO to proactively work toward a 100% non-carbon energy portfolio, provided we can maintain those three foundational pillars. And the communities determined that they could make better progress together than by pursuing separate plans. And the board at the time acknowledged that several advancements would need to occur in order for us to achieve that goal. And that includes being an active participant in an organized energy market, expanding transmission and distribution infrastructure. Also knew that we would need to see some advancements in battery storage technology, as well as improving distributed energy resource performance and integration. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to switch gears and talk through some of the progress that we've made since that policy was passed, and then look ahead to the future and what it is we're planning to do between now and 2030. Next slide. So we're pleased to say that we've made some good progress toward this goal as your wholesale provider. We've added non-carbon energy, including wind and solar projects, plus some battery storage. We entered into the Southwest Power Pool's energy imbalance market in 2023, and that's a good stepping stone to joining a fully organized market. During this time, we also developed and received approval for 2 integrated resource plans, and I'll define what those are and the importance of those a little later in the presentation. This year, we began commercial operation of our largest solar project to date. In fact, the largest solar project in northern Colorado, called Black Hollow Sun. And again, we plan to retire Craig Unit 1 at the end of this year. Next slide, please. So next year, we will complete the Black Hollow Sun project with the commercial operation of phase 2. We will also be breaking ground and will hopefully have come online 100 megawatts of 4-hour utility scale storage. And that project is going to be installed next to our solar site there in Severance, to the Black Hollow Sun site. Also on April 1st in 2026, we will enter the Regional Transmission Organization, and that really serves as our full energy market. So that's a big milestone for us. From there, we're helping manage the intermittency of our largely renewable portfolio with some additional battery storage in the communities, as well as working on a virtual power plant, which Susan will speak to a little bit more later. And we'll be managing those peak loads and potential dark calms with natural gas aeroderivative turbines that are designed to respond to fluctuations in renewable energy. By the end of the decade, we expect to bring back some wind that we sold in order to take advantage of some better costs of our Roundhouse Renewable Energy Project in Wyoming. And we will retire our Rawhide Unit 1 at the end of 2029. Next slide, please. So what does our overall decarbonization progress look like since the policy passed? This is a good snapshot of how we're doing. So in 2018, about a quarter of our resources came from non-carbon sources. This year, our budgeted system total is about over 40% of our resources come from non-carbon sources. And by 2030, based on the path that was recently approved in our 2024 IRP, we expect to have about 88% non-carbon resources and about 12% of dispatchable capacity. And that is made up of things like the aeroderivative turbines that I mentioned, the batteries, and the virtual power plant. So those are the components of the dispatchable capacity, whereas the renewable energy comes from wind and solar. Next slide, please. So here, Susan and I are going to kind of tag team this section about VPP and DER. So I'll give an overview of kind of our role in this, and she'll provide an update on where we are with our plans for programming. Next slide. So VPP has been part of our decarbonization plan since 2020 when we first filed the 2020 IRP. It's part of our dispatchable resources strategy to help manage the intermittency of renewables. And as you know, it's comprised of customer-owned devices like smart thermostats, EVs, and home battery packs that can respond to energy supply and demand as needed. And so that's a component of that dispatchable strategy to help us manage the intermittency. Next slide, please. Hand that off to Susan to talk through our progress here.
Thanks, Kendall. And again, because we kind of took a deep dive in June on distributed energy resources and virtual power plants, I won't talk about specifics here, but I did want to let you know kind of where we are in our journey with our local distributed energy resources and the virtual power plant. I think when we talked with you in June, we had selected a vendor to help us, an aggregator to help us with the virtual power plant. And Platte River is working through contracting with that vendor. We're excited to be able to work with them. They work with a lot of utilities across the United States, a lot of customers, a lot of different devices. So we're eager to kind of learn from them and what they've done in other jurisdictions to help us build out our programs. And some of the things that you may see in Longmont in the next few years include smart thermostat management. And this will mostly help us kind of clip peak demand during summer, during the cooling season. You'll also likely see EV smart charging management or EV charge management. And this will allow us to encourage customers to charge when there's readily available renewable energy on our grid, or to not charge when we're at our peak, or there's not a great supply of renewable energy on the grid. You'll likely see battery storage programming. And again, this is another opportunity for us to work with customers with their own devices to be able to charge those batteries when we have plentiful renewable energy available and discharge when we have some grid constraints or the price of energy is very high. And then finally, we also want to start working more with our large commercial customers that have they can flex or reduce, some of them, not all of them, but some can flex or reduce their load to align with grid conditions. And we want to be able to work with them to achieve some additional resources there. And I just want to point out that all of these programs are kind of bring your own stuff to the party. And because of that, we anticipate providing incentives both for people when they sign their devices up and also as they participate over time. Next slide. So as I mentioned, our vendor has experience with a lot of different programs and a lot of different utilities and jurisdictions, but we want to make sure that these programs are appropriate for our local communities and for Platte River. And for this reason, we're using some time in 2025 to kind of design what our outcomes need to be and make sure that we're addressing kind of our first use cases in 2025. And then in 2026, we're going to launch some programs. You are likely to see the thermostat program in 2026 and also potentially the EV charge management program in 2026. We're going to use that year to make sure that we understand the enrollment process and that our systems are talking to one another so we can define eligibility and we can do some measurement and verification. So 2026 is going to be a testing and learning year for us, but it's also an opportunity for customers to begin to participate. And then in 2027 and 2028, we're going to evolve from kind of basic scheduled-based operations where we're primarily looking to reduce peak demand to more of a market dispatch where we're trying to tie our operations of the virtual power plant to cost and availability of energy through the market. In 2029 and 2030, we're going to be optimizing our systems and our integrations such that we can start to address situational needs on the distribution grid. So locally, we'll be able to look at groupings of devices and operate to mitigate or to support things happening locally as well as at the market scale. And then in 2030, we just need to continue to scale enrollment and refine and adjust our systems so that we can get the most bang for the resource with the virtual power plant. And then speaking of refining and adjusting, Kendall is going to share about Platte River's 2028 IRP process. So you can go to the next slide.
Thank you, Susan. Next slide. Thank you. So we're required by Western Area Power Administration to submit an integrated resource plan, or IRP, every 5 years. Since 2018, we've accelerated those filings to be able to align more with the planning and kind of the condensed time frame of us trying to meet this 2030 goal. Our most recent IRP, as I mentioned, was approved in last July and was successfully accepted by WAPA. These plans take about 2 years to produce. And so our next one we plan to file in the summer of 2028. So while the comms team hasn't yet started to develop an engagement plan around this 2028 IRP, that is top of our list starting early next year with an intent to have a strategy finalized in the spring. And those will launch sometime in the summer of 2026 and will just be ongoing throughout. So we'll come back and provide updates as we have them throughout the process. And then our target for actually completing the IRP document and filing that with WAPA will be the summer of 2028. We are happy to present IRP updates to this group as part of that process. So definitely let us know if that's of interest, and we'll be sure to get on your schedules for that. And again, that effort will begin, at least from the comms team, here in January. Next slide, please. All right, so my final slide is to give you all some awareness and context around a public education campaign that we've had going since July. Next slide, please. So we continue to try to educate our public on who Platte River is and how we're governed, how we're connected to you all as owner communities. We also want to share our progress toward advancing the energy transition for the region, and then also help people understand the value of that transition, especially since we're seeing some increased cost pressures to accomplish it. We want to make sure that people understand the value that they're getting for those higher rates. So as I mentioned, we launched this campaign back in July, and so the first segment ran through September. Some of you may have seen it. It featured a video of several of our board members, including Daryl, speak to how Platte River was formed, how we're governed, and how essentially we feel we're better together in providing energy to our customers as well as moving toward this ambitious goal. Phase 2 is underway right now. And actually features my boss, Tim Blodgett, our Chief Strategy Officer. He highlights the progress that we've made that I just walked you through earlier in this presentation, as well as underscores some of the challenges that we're navigating together as we work toward this goal. That'll wrap up here shortly ahead of the holidays. And then phase 3 production of that is underway with plans to launch that in January. And that will again be the voices of our communities through our utility directors. So you will be seeing Daryl as well as utility directors from our other owner communities speaking about the value of the transition for their customers and, you know, what folks are getting for the increased rates, which is a highly decarbonized system with the same level of reliability. So we're excited to be working on that with our communities and launching that here at the beginning of the year. Next slide. So I will transition it over to Susan to highlight some of LPC's accomplishments.
Thanks again, Kendall. You can go to the next slide. So distributed energy resources are going to be an important part of Platte River's portfolio approach to decarbonization. Kendall talked about that a little bit and what part the virtual power plant will play in the dispatchable resources that are part of that portfolio. And owner communities are kind of on the front line of that work because these devices are in our communities. They're our customers. And harnessing those distributed energy resources into a viable VPP resources is really important for our collective success. And some of the steps that LPC is taking to enable local distributed energy resource engagement include improving and updating our interconnection standards so everything is operating appropriately and safely and the communications are effective. Also, we're developing a DER system of record. And what that is simply a compilation for us to understand what DERs are on our grid, to know where they are and kind of how they behave in order to optimize devices that will be enrolled in our VPP in the future. And that helps us with our integration with Platte River. We're also working to advance systems with Platte River and the other owner communities so that all of these devices are supporting the overarching collective needs as well as some grid support needs. And so those are big system integrations. And many of you may know that we're also doing a lot of city system improvements like our customer information system and a meter data management system. So there are a lot of system improvements happening right now. Kendall mentioned battery storage. So we are working with Platte River on a utility-owned battery storage project at one of our substations, and that should be online in 2027. But in addition to that, we're also looking at other city facilities for good locations where we can put smaller scale batteries and that might help us with resilience or overloaded equipment in certain areas, or just to help us kind of test the use cases for battery use at the distribution level. It's kind of, it says here, kind of a sandbox. Having these batteries locally that we own will allow us to learn how to use them effectively as a utility, but also understand kind of how that's going to affect customers that may own batteries. So we're kind of excited about that work. And then we continue, especially with Efficiency Works, to press for building efficiency with our own facilities, with our commercial customers, and in homes. Next slide. I'm also very excited about local renewable energy in the form of Illuminar, and that's the city's community solar program. And I'm excited about it because our first project came online in October of this year. It's at our Longmont Waste Services building on Martin Street. It's not a very big system, only 200 kW. So we are limited in the number of subscribers that we have, but we'll have 15 income qualified subscribers from our CARES program, and then 15 market rate customers. And the income qualified customers will get a discounted rate on their energy, and the market rate customers will pay a premium to be able to support local solar. And again, that launched in October. The second project that we have that has been constructed is on Longmont Housing Authority's property at Ascent at Hover Crossing. This one is an interesting application in that it's a partnership with the Housing Authority, and that system, which is about the same size as the system on Martin Street, the generation will be allocated among the tenants that will live in that property based on their apartment size. And we hope to have that one launched in January. Next slide. So Kendall touched on reliability as one of the pillars that's important to our operations. Obviously, it's always top of mind for us. LPC has historically had remarkably high reliability based on industry standards. And that reliability is the work of strong early investment in infrastructure, as well as continued and steady growth where we add to our grid. However, the investments from the past aren't going to last forever. And without proactive investment in maintenance and replacement, our reliability will suffer over time. So the good news on this front is that in 2026, we're going to have a dedicated crew that's going to focus specifically on maintenance so that we can be proactive while reliability is still very high. You know, we don't want to wait until things are terrible, we want to go ahead and maintain that good reliability. And so what we're working on right now is a maintenance plan that kind of sorts the projects that we have in the queue based on key criteria. And the goal is that we want to work strategically to address the highest priorities with this new crew. So we're excited about that. Next slide. And I'll just circle back around to education and engagement. Kendall talked about Platte River's education campaign and how important it is to tell customers why we're doing what we're doing. It's important for Platte River. It's also important for LPC kind of now more than ever. We need our customers to know who we are, who our partners are, so who's on our team. And in our jurisdiction, it can be very confusing. We have 2 counties, we have the city, we have Platte River, we have LPC, which is a subset of the city, and we have other organizations that we partner with on a regular basis. And there are innumerable organizations that are all talking about energy in our area. And so it's important for us to be able to let folks know who's on our team, who's on their team, who to reach out for. And so, having some good engagement is really important. It's also important because we want to make progress in our community goals. And we need our customers to know, first of all, what those goals are, and then how they can contribute, that we need them to be involved. And we need them to be involved through conservation, electrification. We want them to enroll their devices in the virtual power plant. We want them to support community solar, but they can't do any of that if they don't know about it. So it's our job to get out and make sure that they understand our goals and how they can participate. So we're hoping to keep spreading information through things like community and neighborhood events, through educational collaborations, specific outreach efforts, also through our customer programming and our partnership with Platte River and Efficiency Works, and then leading with our own facilities and resources when possible. It's a really critical component of being able to be successful with the ambitious goals that we have. And on that point, you can go to the next slide and we can take questions. And
Okay,
Robert,
well,
I'll
thank you.
let you kind of
Yeah, thank
organize
you,
that.
Kendall and Susan, for the presentation. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask? Ethan, I think I saw your hand go up first. Go ahead.
Thanks. You mentioned Craig Unit 1 shutting down at the end of this year. Are you aware of the reporting that there's expected to be a federal order to keep Craig Unit 1 open?
Yes, we are.
Can you talk about that?
Some. So as I mentioned, we are partners in Craig Unit 1 with other utilities. Tri-State is the operating agent. All of the partners are in agreement that we disagree with the need to keep that unit open. All of our resource plans do not include counting on that resource after 2025. That being said, we're relying on Tri-State to let us know how to maintain compliance if that order does come through. But until we hear otherwise, we're moving forward with plans to retire that unit.
Can you provide an update on the air quality permitting process for the new gas turbines at Rawhide?
That I don't have at the ready, but I'm happy to follow up with the latest information with this group.
Does anyone have that information? Who's on the call?
No, I don't think so.
Well, I saw that the public comment period is open now from November 10th till December 10th, and there's a draft permit that's been published. So in case anyone's interested in following up on that, you can go to the well, I'll share that link in the chat later when I get a second to find it.
So
Thanks,
Ethan,
Ethan.
we are not able to use the chat on this meeting because of transparency with the community. So once you find that link, if you want to email it to me, I can send it to the board later on.
Sure.
Daniel, you got your hand raised. Go ahead.
Hey, hi. Yeah, thank you for this. I was a little bit curious. I know it's on a nationally kind of a conversation right now is data centers, and particularly these very large data centers with high energy utilization, and they're, increasing prices for those communities that have to support them. And I was kind of curious what, if a data center were to join the Platte River network, what is there a plan? I don't know anything about this topic, so I'm kind of I don't know what questions are the right ones to ask, but I'm kind of curious if, the owner communities, what kind of control do we have to say no to a data center or to require those data centers to use their own generation of energy? Just kind of curious about, that threat.
Daniel, I can take this.
Yeah.
Daryl from LPC. Um, yeah, it's a good question. It's actually one that the Platte River Board and the four owner communities have been working on. We're drafting sort of a policy framework right now to kind of just give us some boundaries within which, everybody can agree we want to work. In general, what we don't want to do, just very broadly, is make existing customers or even future customers pay for the data centers, whether it's in rates or, that kind of thing. So we're really just trying to make sure that in much the same way that standard development quote unquote pays its own way for the most part. These data centers are no different in that way in terms of them paying their own way. The other thing that we want to keep an eye on too is, we do have the resource diversification policy that was mentioned earlier, that Kendall mentioned. And so what we don't want to do is say, you had mentioned maybe asking these folks to bring in their own generation. We don't want to say, well, you're bringing in a 20 megawatt data center or 100 megawatt data center, put in all the diesel generators you want to generate your own electricity, right? I mean, so it's definitely a balancing act there. On the other hand, it could really be, if done correctly, it could really be a huge boon for the communities, the owner communities, and for Platte River to have the right type of data center come into, one of our communities. Generally, the load factor of these can be quite high, meaning they're on pretty steady, kind of all the time. And those ideally generally tend to be the best kind of load that we want. And so that can, again, in the right situations, that can provide some rate relief to everybody else. But again, it has to be that uniquely correct customer that comes in. So I don't know if that answers your questions, but just, I guess, rest assured that is a topic of conversation, obviously across the industry, but specifically at Platte River and the four owner communities.
I had a question, and thank you for that, Daryl. Um, on the pie chart slide about where we're going to be in 2030, it looked like we're going to be at about 80% of non-carbon generation. I know there was an aspiration to be at 100% by 2030. I guess I was going to ask, like, what's been the response from the four owner communities about that? Or is everyone satisfied that that's a responsible amount of progress considering where technology has evolved and what's available? Or yeah, how has that been received?
Sure, good question. I can defer to Daryl as kind of the board member on the call as far as what the response have been. Again, that's kind of rooted in the IRP planning process that we do and our best estimate of where we can be at the time. So I would just underscore, we definitely celebrate it as progress, but it's not the stopping point. We still have the ultimate goal in mind, and we'll continue to pursue that. It's just what we feel like we can responsibly get to by 2030. And I'll let Daryl speak to anything more on that.
Yeah, it's a good question. The board, the Platte River Board receives pretty frequent updates from the Platte River team. And as you know, we have two representatives of the eight on that board, myself and the mayor. It's been Mayor Peck for the last few years, and it presumably will be Mayor Susie Hidalgo Farring going forward. That's up to her. In any case, we've been receiving these updates from the team, and we just most recently the board reaffirmed its support of this particular path. we're really getting to a hockey stick moment here where we're able to make incremental progress toward that non-carbon goal, but then at some point to make an additional incremental step in that direction, the costs just really start to get kind of out of sight. And we're already starting to kind of touch on that a little bit where, just the inflationary pressures are getting way beyond what we had anticipated. Projects that Platte River had budgeted for are coming in at a lot higher cost than what we had anticipated and budgeted. So we're starting to get to that point where it's like, okay, barring any kind of new technology that has come to market and is something that is, at a reasonable price, we're kind of, I think, getting to the limits of where we can get with today's technology. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Ethan, go ahead.
Yeah, related to the issue of cost, you said we're getting to a hockey stick moment. Is that the case in terms of cost as well? And is it true that the estimated cost of new gas turbines has more than doubled and nearly tripled?
So the cost of the turbines themselves were, pretty reasonable. I think they were a little bit higher than anticipated, but not much. What's actually costing a lot more is installing them and getting them connected. So absolutely, those are coming in a lot higher than we had budgeted. We'd reached out to a pretty well-respected engineering firm beforehand to say, what should we expect this to cost so we can get some budgetary estimates pulled together? They gave us a number, and at the time, those were very accurate. And then in the next, year or so, what ended up happening is everybody's jumping on the bandwagon. And I hate to say it that way, but we're seeing much larger utilities than us saying, "Oh yeah, you want 5 of these aeroderivatives? Guess what? We want 50, or we want 100." And so now those folks are really the ones kind of driving the prices up to the point where of the installations to the point where in order for us to find a reputable engineering and construction firm to install them, we're going to have to pay a lot more just because these other companies have a lot deeper pockets and can pay a lot more money to install those types of units.
So in terms of raw numbers, is that 240 million that started at, and now it's like 625 million? Is that roughly accurate?
I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but those sound roughly sort of in the ballpark. Yeah, it's
Yeah, that's what I've seen reported.
it's a lot more than anticipated. Yeah.
What does that mean for rates?
So the Platte River rates team has come out with some proposed rates going into 27 and 28. The initial, and Kendall, you'll correct me if I'm wrong here, the initial rate projected increases for 27 and 28 were like 6.3%, and now they're projected to be about 7.5% for those 2 years. Um, so.
This is another technical question. Do you know the annual average capacity factor for the new gas turbine that's being planned?
It's a lot higher than solar and wind, but I don't have the number off the top of my head.
I can jump in on that one, Daryl. This is Malie. I'm with Platte River Power Authority. I'm the Chief Power Supply Officer. We're expecting the capacity factor to be less than 10%, but no more than 20%. We're going into a new RTO, so it's difficult I don't want to guarantee you a number, but certainly it's capped at, from what I understand, at 20% with the air permit, but we're expecting it to be closer to 10.
So is that what's the maximum that's being allowed, 20% in the air permit?
That's my understanding, yes.
All right, Ethan, if you've got more, we'll come back to you in a bit. Well, Alyssa, why don't you get your hand raised for a bit?
Yeah, expanding on that question from Ethan, I was just thinking stranded gas assets. It's something that we've talked a lot about in some of the other groups I'm involved in that are focused on renewables. And so in relation to this natural gas turbine, I know we've got like projections around obviously renewables, battery storage, distributed power. There's plans in the future for hydrogen integration. But what happens to these turbines financially if that doesn't materialize as planned by 2030? Especially taking in consideration the fact that we're expecting to hear from the DOE this federal order.
So I can take another stab at. Oh, I was just going to say,
Go ahead,
really, yeah, these units are designed and purchased for the sole purpose of not running very often. So, to borrow a phrase that Jason Frisby, the Platte River GM and CEO, uses, these are kind of the shock absorber, right? So they come on, they turn off, they come on, they turn off. They're really not intended to be running all the time, like you might see with other types of units. And so the intent is by bringing in these types of units, you're actually able to bring in more unreliable, if you will, or unpredictable renewable energy so that they can turn on when the solar turns off or they can turn on when the wind dies down. So by having these units, you can really kind of ramp them up and down very quickly, which is what they're designed to do. But they're not intended to run all the time. So the capacity factor, so I misunderstood the question, but yeah, the capacity factor, as Melissa said, is supposed to be very low because they're not intended to run all the time.
Sure. I think my question was maybe more focused on the changes at the federal level and if we expect that the plan for hydrogen or the other plans that we've discussed, the portfolio approach to meeting the 2030 goal, if that is at risks. And then building on Ethan's comment, I'm just thinking about how these higher wholesale rates are going to disproportionately affect lower income community members, and can we advocate for more equity-based rate programs as a part of this transition?
I can speak to the stranded investment piece that you were talking about, if the risk of this being a stranded asset. Everything Daryl said is accurate, that, we don't expect it to run that much. But the other piece of the puzzle with these aeroderivatives, one of the things that it brings to the table is, even without burning gas, it provides inertia on the system that provides grid stability. The inverters on the renewable assets cannot provide that spinning capability so that it maintains frequency. So we see these as very valuable, even if we're not burning the gas and it's not needed. But we obviously, that's why we're investing in them. We see them being needed for some time to come. I think what you might have been suggesting, correct me if I'm wrong, that, if these executive orders keep coming and coal is supposed to be left online, what does that do for us? The unit one is not to retire till the end of 29. Who knows if we'll be under the same administration at that time. And of course, we will be in a situation, because of the aeroderivatives, that we will have sufficient capacity that it would be very difficult for someone to point to us and say that there's an energy emergency, and so therefore we're going to issue an executive order to keep the unit online. One of the things that I've been looking at is, if we suddenly see a lot of these coal plants being ordered to stay online, many of the coal mines have already been reducing production, planning for shutting down. They're letting people go. You have rail contracts that are impacted. This is a very complicated, a lot of infrastructure that can't be easily turned, turned around. So what I anticipate is we would see an increase in coal prices, and that would make the gas units more economic than unit one, as well as cleaner than unit one. And that obviously has an impact on the other part of your question, that if we're avoiding coal that is more expensive, that has to run more because it can't cycle off and on as the aeroderivatives can, as Daryl spoke to, that then these aeroderivatives not only become a great position for integrating more renewables and managing the reliability of the system, but it becomes an even better financial position to be in, because we won't be exposed to what it could be potentially higher coal prices due to the dwindling coal supply from coal mines having been ramping down, while executive orders are ramping up, keeping coal plants online. I hope that helps.
Councilmember Popkin, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the discussion here. Thank you, Daryl and LPC staff, as well as PRPA staff, for joining us today. Daryl, you offered a lot of detail in response to many different answers, and I think it really gets at that balancing act there of sustainability, reliability, and affordability that we're trying to juggle as we work towards this complicated transition. So I appreciate the nuances that you're bringing to the conversation. I did have a question about following up on Board Member Augreen's question. You mentioned the install costs, particularly for the aeroderivative turbines, had gone up like precipitously. Could you speak a little bit more to why it's like the install specifically? It's not the equipment, but it's actually like the setup and all of that, and how that's like in the tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars?
I can certainly, yeah, no, I appreciate the question and the opportunity to kind of clarify. And I know Malie has forgotten more about this stuff than I'll ever know, so I'll welcome her to jump in with additional details. But yeah, it was really kind of in a two-part approach, right? One was to purchase the units from the manufacturer, the folks who actually build the units, and then once we get them, typically you would contract with a different company with a different skill set to actually install them and get them connected and all that kind of thing. So the first part went more or less to plan. I mean, again, they came in a little higher, I think, than we had expected, but kind of within a reasonable range. But then things happened so quickly to the point where, like I said, a lot of other utilities were jumping on the bandwagon. A lot of utilities a lot bigger than we are, who said, "Yeah, we want those same units." I think TVA, I think there's like 45 going in up in Wyoming. So we're now kind of the flea on the tail of the dog, asking for a little bit of attention. And a lot of these engineering and construction companies, they're going to go for the bigger jobs just because that's where the money is. And so if they're going to pull away from installing 50 or 100 of these units to install just five, it's going to cost a lot more than we had expected.
Yeah, so I'm
Yeah,
curious what lessons we. Sorry, go ahead.
oh, sorry, Matthew. I was just going to chime in there. That we were very careful and we thought slow and tried to act fast when it came to these aeroderivatives and the EPC contract. It worked quite well, as Daryl said, on the turbines themselves. About 3 months ago, we were told that we're actually getting a 40% discount on the turbines compared to where they are priced today. And if we had ordered them even a few months later than we did, say 3, 4 months later, we would be looking at an arrival of like 2030, 2032 for these units. But it was the EPC, and I can't give, exact numbers, but what we were told by the firm that we contracted with to establish the budgetary numbers, we were south of 100 million for an EPC contract and ended up closer to 300 million. It was a sticker shock, and we did a lot of reassessing and looking, and we talked to 39 different EPC contractors. Only one would respond with a bid. So not only could we not get a better price, we couldn't get any price from anyone else because there's so much activity across the country for construction with these data centers and for specifically aeroderivatives. We turned over, and we feel very fortunate with the one that we ended up with because they're quite reputable. It's a good company, but yeah, things just moved very fast in this particular sector over the last year.
Yeah, no, that's not surprising given the state of the market and where it's at. I guess what I'm curious
Right?
about going forward from here is, PRPA just went through an integrated resource planning process just finished last year. And part of the goal of that was to assess all the balancing act of, reliability systems, sustainability systems, and cost. Right. And so I'm curious, what lessons are we learning from this to inform the next integrated resource planning effort? Recognizing that not only are we going to run into technology commercialization issues, not only are we going to run into supply chain for equipment issues, but now it seems like we're running into like literal physical installation supply chain issues. And so I guess how do we factor that in? Because I'd be really, really curious. Need to pull this back up, but I'd be really curious to see what the assumptions were going into that to understand just how far we've come from there and how we balance between different trade-offs at that point. So it's more of
I will
a
tell you for
philosophical question to some degree here, but I'd be curious, like how are we learning from this situation for future planning? Because this is not going to be the last time that we're going to try to be on the cutting edge of technologies and run into other private companies, technology companies, governments, and other utilities much larger than us that are going to run into this for the next
I
couple decades.
completely agree. I completely agree. And it is something that, we don't want to navel gaze, but we certainly need to learn our lessons and what could we have done better in this situation. It's something we've talked about. I just said it in the previous response. It's think slow, act fast. The IRP, as Kendall talked to, and as you're well aware, that takes at least 2 years to complete. So that's the thinking slow. I think what we could have done in this instance is we should have moved faster in the execution once we got the go ahead to do it. We did a little bit of and I think, and I'm not going to say it wasn't appropriate, but there was an ask that we take a beat and we do an all resource RFP. I'm not blaming the situation on that, but I will say it slowed us down a bit. And we were very confident in what we were, doing. We had spent obviously 2.5 years doing the RFP and coming to the conclusion that we did. And that was a hiccup, an unfortunate timing, especially, it's Monday morning quarterbacking to an extent because we didn't end up getting any more successful bids out of that all resource RFP and ended up going the same direction. There were other things though, that was just one a small part of it. Another piece of it is just making sure that, we invested heavily, we feel, in communications and trying to bring different groups in the cities. Certainly, I think we were there as far as getting the board and city staff to see the vision and see the analysis and what we were putting into it. We had several community events, but trying to get across more so that we're all wanting the same outcome and trying to build more confidence so that then, because it's that hard balance, right? We have to be able to act fast once we see what the proper solution is, but we also have to address those concerns from citizens and from stakeholders that we're bringing them along with us and that they understand what goes into these decisions. So I'd say that this is a lesson that we need to learn collectively as 5 entities, as well as with all of the stakeholders. What information can we provide faster, better? How can we have more constructive conversation in order to build? We're never going to have consensus, right, on where to move forward, but where can we get some more confidence so then we can do that acting fast? Because you're so right. This industry is volatile. It's getting more and more volatile as we move forward. Things change quickly. So as soon as we identify that this is the direction we need to go, we need to act on it so we can avoid these kind of situations.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'll offer 2 final comments and then I'll shut up here. The first is, I think that partly answers my question. However, there's the acting part, and then there's how you think about it. And what I'm hearing, what I didn't hear quite clearly is that what you model for when you're actually doing the thinking should be the range of potential futures when we're talking about this that could include these types of installation issues or supply chain issues. So I'd want to make sure that when we're doing the thinking, we're thinking about it with that whole range of potential futures in mind, or at least a high scenario, medium scenario, and low. And we might even have to adjust what those actually look like in the future. And then just a clarifying question on timing here, which is my understanding is that all resources are the all requirements RFP that was issued Q1 2024, and I think closed for bids in Q2 2024. Am I correct on that timing? And the IRP itself wasn't approved until the summer, right?
It was approved by WAPA in July of 2024, correct? And then we actually went out and secured for the turbines. We had you're talking about the things, so we actually had mapped out the project timeline when different activities needed to happen. So first we needed to make sure we had the turbines secured. And once we had those secured and we were talking to GE Vernova, then it was okay, we've got that locked down. Now let's do the RFP for the EPC. And as you know, an RFP takes 2 or 3 months. So it was in August that I believe August or September that then when the RFP closed, we only had one response. And we saw what that price was. Then we started going out and looking actively for anybody else who maybe they missed our RFP or what have you. So that is a direct result of the project timeline that was put in place, back in the end of 23 and early 24.
That makes sense. Yeah, if it's helpful another time, I'd be happy to sidebar and talk about potential ways we can accelerate RFP process in the future. I'm working with the city right now on how do we meet some of the very rapid tax credit sunset deadlines and trying to take what might take 14 months, start to finish and do it in 8 or 6. So
Right.
happy to
Well,
brainstorm there in a way that's still fair and competitive to the market.
yeah, we're always open to that. I will say, like, so we had a verbal lockdown for the turbines, but we did not sign that contract, I believe, until August or September. And so we aligned the closing of the RFP and those conversations for whenever the ink would be dried on that deal for
Sure.
the turbines. So it was trying to get that just right. And there was
Cool. Thank
another,
you.
as far as how we approach the IRP, I will tell you, I think Kendall spoke to it a little bit. We are right now, I just spoke to Masood yesterday about this. What is our project timeline for this next IRP? And looking at what are the different scenarios of that we're examining for this next IRP? What are the um, you know, I'm actually I just took a course in Amsterdam this summer at Price Cooper's Waterhouse, and we and also in London from Ernst and Young, and we're looking at a big part of the coursework was looking at how do we even go beyond stochastic modeling. We need to start looking. I was kind of surprised that now it seems like we're kind of going back to this scenario planning for modeling, and really emphasizing that. And that's what I'm looking forward to doing in this next IRP. We will, of course, will still be doing some of the traditional modeling, but it's going to. I anticipate that we'll be doing much more of the scenario modeling. Not that we didn't before. If you go back and look, we have different scenarios that I've forgotten. It was well over a dozen, and we kind of narrowed it down and did further analysis on the ones we felt were most primary. But certainly, be willing to talk to you, be interested in talking to you about some of the scenarios that you would see. But that's certainly where I see it going. You have to do that. It's because, as you know, stochastic modeling can tell you so much, but it can also give you a false sense of confidence. Where scenario planning, scenario modeling can actually allow you to lay it out, like on a game board, as to, if this happens, then this is going to happen over here, and prices are going to go in this direction. And so, how does that impact our thinking about our next resource decision?
Yeah, it's a brave new world, certainly with the evolution of technology there and the pace of change. Thank you.
And it's fun.
Becky, you've had your hand up for a while. Please. Oh, I think you might be on mute or have a microphone problem. Is anyone else able to hear Becky? Well, we'll circle back in a minute if were there other folks who had anything else. I think Jeff, you had your hand up. Lisa, you had your hand up at one point. I assume you got your questions answered and are good. Ethan, did you have a little more?
Yeah, I have a follow-up.
Yeah, please.
Um, there's a discrepancy I see in the draft permit, which I think is important. I wanted to drill down on. And it says the annual limit of combined turbine operating hours for all 5 turbines is 21,410 hours on a 12-month rolling basis. And that's a lot more than 20%. I think in my calculation comes out to closer to 50%. So I want to understand why that discrepancy seems to exist.
Yeah, and I'll double check with our environmental engineers. But what that comes down to is the number of hours we're operating. We're not necessarily operating at the top, and we may not be operating for a full hour. My understanding is if we're operating within 15 minutes of an hour, then it's counted against us. But I'm not the environmental engineer who put together all of those permits. So the capacity factor being, 100% capacity factor would be these units running at the very maximum output for 8,760 hours of the year. So when you're talking about 20%, it's hard to compare that to the number of hours of operation. So if you have these units that are if they're back down to a minimum at some point, then that would bring down their capacity factor. And when we model, we use ProMod. If we're not seeing, obviously, that every time the units come on. Number one, not all of the units will come on every time one of them comes on. We may have several hours or many instances where just one or maybe two of the units are operating. And then, also when they're operating, they're not operating all the way at the top.
Is there a greater amount of emissions during the startup and shutdown phase for these turbines?
Just like any other thermal resource, yes. But they also have a very quick start. So
Thank you. Becky, did you want to give it a try one more time?
We can try, but
Yeah. Hey, we
hey,
hear you now.
sometimes if you turn it off and turn it on again. Um, this has been a minute ago, but Alyssa had a question about equity and rates, and I just wanted to make sure that this group was aware of the Longmont Cares program, which is an income qualified rebate program that spans a variety of tax and utility services, including electric service, and that uh, we have an ordinance coming up on December 2nd that the council has directed us to bring forward to expand access to that program to some, to some additional households and some additional qualification pathways that will also increase the electric rebate specifically by $10 a month. So just wanted to make sure everyone had that information.
Thanks,
Perfect.
Becky.
Thank you. All right, last call. Oh, go ahead, Alec. Was that? Yeah, go ahead.
Just a quick and easy question about these. Did I hear like 12% increase in energy costs to the customer over the course of the next 2 years? Like 6% increase each year or something like that?
Yeah, the original was 6.3% per year for 27 and 28, I believe, and now it's 7.5%. So that's
Okay. So the rate increase for the I guess installation miscalculations is just 1 point something percent annually
that's
for
part of
those
it.
two
And
years.
yeah, and that was taken into account. I don't know that that accounts for all of the increase, but that was certainly a big part of it.
And then so the seven as a whole, that is just uh, that's the increase that ultimately the transition is costing, and that's am I understanding that correctly? Like,
So the rate increases do account for a lot of it is due to the transition. There are other elements too, just in terms of like inflation, right? That's another big piece. We're even seeing that in other departments of the city. So um, yeah.
and then so affordability being one of the three, yeah. What's the bar? When have you tipped that scale too much and you're no longer in affordability? If yeah, we're already seeing 14% over 2 years. When does the yellow light and the red light go off?
That's a really hard question to answer. I mean, there's no formula for it, right? Because you're right, and Councilmember Popkin brought up sort of that three-legged stool with affordability being, one of those things. Because the thing is, with today's technology, if we really wanted to just force the issue, we could get to 100% renewable, right?
Of
Um,
course.
Put in a ton of batteries, and you just make it happen. Or at least get really, really close, But it would cost an astronomical amount of money. So that's kind of what you're talking about. It's like, well, we don't want to get to 100% if that's what it's going to cost. So how about we look at 88%? And then that kind of seems to have really been the balance that we're able to strike is we can get as far as we can, but still increasing rates, but hopefully not by too much. But too much,
Mm,
what does that mean, right?
yeah.
Right.
So
And it was also just for awareness, lots of discussion at the board level about this and how to manage it, what some different options were, what the costs were. Platte River has done some extensive work on, how can we help minimize the wholesale rate pressure and presented those. And part of the reason that that 7.5% wholesale rate is split between 2 years is this idea of rate smoothing. So instead of having this one big, potentially double-digit hike, in 1 year, can we smooth that out across multiple years? And while it's, the higher increase than what we projected previously is landing in 27 and 28, wholesale rate increases for next year, the 6.3%, as well as a few years thereafter, also contribute to paying for the transition. So that's definitely a consideration that was part of the discussion at the board level when these rates were recommended.
But then at the same time, though, you wouldn't have, there's no, know that for the past 50 years, we've managed to maintain this for people in the price of power. And if we see that increase in cloud cover, this, that, the other, begin to continually tip things that, yeah, it ultimately seems like we're diving in and retiring what would be like fallback plans and old infrastructure. And I guess as a citizen, that's a bit intimidating for something that we really just, is new, and involves so much of nature, which I love, but like she does what she wants. Um,
I,
yeah, I
And
mean, in Colorado, it was 30% cloud cover this year, unheard of for Colorado, and with no rain in what? Yeah, we're yeah, not that that matters, but anyway.
And if I could jump in here a little bit too, we also really look at, obviously the utility or the electric utility is a really big component of our utility bill, but we really try to look at the bill as a whole and all of the services that we provide as a city and how all of those costs are moving and how we're able to balance the needs of the community across all services, and uh
Mhm.
all different needs, including programs for those who are, are income qualified households, as I mentioned, efficiency programs, all these different things. So there's a whole suite of approaches to that, I would say. And it's not only the generation and supply that's coming into even the cost of electricity. It's also, other things that are part of our distribution utility and other pieces. So it's a very complex picture. And yes, and some of it really does, have pieces that are outside of our control. So that's we're looking at a lot of things as we're considering that. And your feedback is one of those things that's important.
All right, Daniel, I'll call on you, and then hopefully we can kind of wind down this part of the agenda here pretty quickly because we probably spent more time on this than we intended to. But go ahead, Daniel.
Mine was pretty quick. I was just curious with the rate increases we're talking about here in our network. I was curious how that compares maybe just to the if you knew the increase of rates for like Excel Energy customers, as a comparison for here in Colorado. I mean, I know we look nationally, we can see, the more renewables you put on, the lower your rates go. But I'm just curious, like in our neck of the woods, what else we're dealing with? Like, yeah, what did that rate increase look like in other communities that aren't in Platte River?
I can take this, although not with any specifics, Daniel. We participate in a survey that looks at utilities across Colorado, and we get annual data on that. And we typically are at the low end for residential rates across the state. And part of that survey does include Tri-State and Xcel Energy. We are less low for large commercial customers, but our residential rates have been the bottom or the second two or three from the bottom historically.
yeah, I can say from the wholesale side, like Colorado Springs Utilities is planning for 6.3% rate increases for the next 5 years, but that's with no additional renewable integration. That's not part of their plan. And then United Power, I believe, had 10% increases for the last couple of years. So I would say we're, with CSU maybe slightly above, but our goals and our energy transition is different, and United Power below.
Ethan, go ahead.
Yeah, it's really quick. In terms of billion cubic feet, can you share the annual gas volume Platte River expects these new gas turbines to consume under the permitted operating envelope?
You stumped me. I can get back to you with that. I don't have that at the top of my
Does
at the
does
tip of
3
my tongue.
billion sound right?
I don't even want to go out on that limb. We are looking at our natural gas strategy to incorporate these aeroderivatives right now. So let me get back to you on that.
Are you able to quantify environmentally, for example, how many new fracking wells will be required?
I don't know that either. That's so far, that's upstream. So, since we have not settled on it, we have a natural gas provider, obviously, for the existing CTs, but we're looking at, what our strategy is going forward for the aeroderivatives. So it would also depend on who we're an off taker from.
Yeah, I think it's important to consider that because we often only talk about greenhouse gas emissions, but there are other environmental factors as well to consider.
Yeah, we're definitely scope one, scope two, perhaps, but we haven't gone all the way to that scope three of, all the way upstream to you know, the
And
wells
just
and,
one
and,
last
and that sort
question.
of
I've
thing.
been wondering about this for a while. Do you know about the fugitive methane emissions that are associated with the new infrastructure?
And that would be a question for midstream once we, settle on who our provider is. Those are all great questions.
All right. Well,
Very
I just
well.
want to say thank you to PRPA and to Longmont Power and Communications. This has been a very lively and engaging discussion, getting into some meaty technical areas. And so I appreciate the expertise in our community to help us make progress here and for sharing those important updates. So thank you. Okay, our next item on the agenda is the public invited to be heard section. I know, Heather, we had a member from the public who was intending to join. Did they get on?
Yes, Kristen is with us.
Okay, well, before we turn it over, let me open it to that and give a reminder to everyone about the Longmont Municipal Code and how it describes the powers and duties of the Sustainability Advisory Board in section 2.96.020. The powers of the board are advisory only, and the duties of the board are to identify topics related to environmental quality and sustainability, such as air and water quality, pollution prevention, solid waste disposal and recycling, energy efficiency, renewable energy, and green building, and to advise the city council on plans, policies, and actions related to those topics. The city council may request the board to consider environmental topics not specifically listed in this section and advise the council on those topics. And we're also to advise the city council on the environmental sustainability aspects of city plans, policies and directives, and related goals, and to define goals for the board, prepare work plans aligned with board responsibilities to advise the council on environmental and sustainability topics. So the way the public invited to be heard will work is your speaker will be unmuted, and you'll be given 5 minutes to speak. Please state your name and your address for the record, and we'll go ahead and get you unmuted now.
Hi, this is Kristen Wolfslegel, 916 Hover Ridge Circle. That was a really interesting discussion, and while it's disappointing we won't make it to 100% by 2030, I guess it's good news that it's because there's a lot of demand elsewhere for renewable energy. I'm sorry, but I'm always like a meeting or two behind on my topics, but a couple of meetings ago, I think it was Robert mentioned regenerative agriculture on city lands. And I just wondered if you had thought about regenerative grassland management with our city lands. So there was a really interesting TED Talk a few years ago by a man named Alan Savory, and it was called How to Fight Desertification and Reverse Climate Change. And I apologize if I'm preaching to the choir, but I'll give you a short rundown of what he said in that presentation. So our grasslands co-evolved with large grazers like buffalo and elk. And as people eliminated these ruminants from our prairies, we've disrupted the ecosystems. Ruminants would eat the grasses, create manure, stomp carboniferous plants into the ground, and then this would cycle nutrients, keep soil microbes alive during the dry season, return carbon to the soil, and hold moisture in the ground. It would also shade the soil from the hot sun. So without the buffalo and the elk, our grassland ecosystems are dying and desertifying. Grasses dry out, smother themselves because they aren't being eaten, and oxidize, releasing their carbon into the atmosphere. The soil also dries out and can no longer hold water or sustain microbial life. Between dead grasses and low ground moisture, our fire risk in grasslands is greatly increased. It can be managed with controlled burns, but this also releases huge amounts of carbon into the atmosphere, kills soil microbial life, and increases rainwater runoff, further exacerbating the desertification. So after learning all of this, I contacted our city ecologist, Jim Crick. He's such a good sport. He never complains about hearing from me. So I asked him if he'd ever considered managing city open space with livestock. He said that he'd experimented some with goats, but found that herd management on public land was challenging. So I put my idea on the back burner for a while until recently when I came across an article about Jay Peak Ski Resort in Vermont using what they called the Chew Crew, which is a herd of goats and sheep to mow their slopes in the summertime, eat the weeds, improve the soil. And of course, they use less fossil fuels by using animals instead of mowers. And they used something called virtual fencing. So, okay, this is where I thought I was coming to you with the problem and the solution. I'm not sure that I have, but I'm bringing you the problem anyway. So, in talking to other people about it, I think there was some question about the ethics of the virtual fencing because in reading about it more, it's sort of like what some people use to keep their dog in a fenceless yard where the animal crosses a prescribed boundary and then gets a zap. So, I don't know about the ethics of it and what everybody feels about it. But after seeing that TED talk about the importance of elk and deer and buffalo and large animals eating our grasses, I thought, gosh, we really need to figure out some way to do this. And I actually ran it past a member of the Native American community last weekend, and he looked crestfallen when I mentioned the virtual fencing, but I just wondered if there was some possibility there of working with the Native American community and asking their advice in reintroducing livestock on open space. I guess that's all that I've got for now, but I figured I would bring the problem to you so that more than one person would be thinking about it. Thank you for letting me speak.
Well, thank you, Kristen. I appreciate you coming to us and making your time for the community. Thank you for bringing that. Okay, well, that is it for the public invited to be heard portion of the agenda. Um, I don't believe we had any other business. Lisa, were there any items from staff that we needed to address that weren't on the agenda here?
No.
Okay. Up next is items from the board. So if there's anything from public invited to be heard that you'd like to introduce or any other topics, now is the opportunity to do so. Corkett, you've got your hand up.
Hi. A few times in the past, I raised this issue about the land use pattern we have and the way the Longmont is sprawling. And I suggested that maybe this, well, uh, the way the zoning ordinance supporting the sprawl should be addressed by our board. And, sounded like there was some support, but that never got into agenda. And then I happened to look at our duties again, and then I realized that actually the language in the duties is that to identify topics, that is to say, it is our responsibility and duty to set the priorities. And I realized that, more than a year I've been in the board, we've not been doing a good job about setting the priorities. We talk about different things, but I appreciate the support by the staff, but we have been depending on the staff too much. Maybe we should shift our focus on what subjects our board would like to focus on, and that's a discussion that should come from the board. That's what I'm reading when I read the first paragraph for the duties. So I just wanted to bring that up. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Corkett. I was going to ask Lisa, do we have in our January meeting a plan to kind of go through the roadmap for next year? Is that I can't recall when we do that.
Yeah, we usually do that in January and try to set some kind of loose work plan for the year based on the topics that you all are interested in. And then I will say there are other things that come up that are identified priorities from City Council that are important to bring to this group. The conversation we had tonight with Platte River being one of them, but we usually do that in January so that we can work on that collectively.
Well, I think that's a great reminder that we should bring our ideas for that January meeting and make sure that we're not um, letting that go by and just sort of not that we're not just along for the ride. Ethan, if you had a comment on this topic, yeah, I thought
Yeah. Yeah, I'm
I saw
happy to
the double hand raise.
provide a second to Corkit to put that on a future agenda, if that'll be helpful to Corkit.
I think it's already on the January meeting plan, so I think
Land
we're
uses?
uh, to discuss like what we want to talk about as a board and what we want to have in our meeting agendas over the 2026 calendar year. And so we can in that January meeting find
We
a
can
time
also
in the
just put
calendar.
make land use a topic for the January meeting so that we don't have to delay that any further, if that would be amenable to the board and to staff.
Mr. Chair, can I jump in on this for a second?
Sure, please.
Thanks. I appreciate the spirit of this, board member on run. And I have a suggestion here because there have been concerns among some city council members, myself included, in some situations, that various boards are kind of acting without direction of council on things. And actually, I'm not speaking about this board in this case. And so, what I would like to say here is, I like where this is going, and what I might suggest is that the board put together a list of topics that they might like to dig deeper into, do a gut check with city council, advise city council and say, hey, we would like to dig into these topics. We think these would be priorities for us. And then let us just say, like, yes, thumbs up on these, or like, hey, focus on these right now and don't do this one right now because of X, Y, and Z. I think that might be a bet, just so that you don't get too far ahead and spin your wheels and then be like, well, why aren't you caring about this? And like, this wasn't a priority for us. So that might be one way to go about this, that where you actually are helping drive and set the agenda and advise council, but there's just that back and forth dialogue to make sure that you're not getting too far out ahead of us. So suggestion, it's not a requirement here. I'm just letting you know what the both the current council and, from my understanding, some of the future council members, or members of the next council, are actively thinking about, and board management is an active topic of discussion.
Thank you. I know Ethan had his hand raised at least for another topic. I assume Corkit and Daniel, that you rapidly raised your hands, I assume, to continue this conversation. So Corkit, I think you're up first on that.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that comes to my mind is that, some topics are not just two words. Land use is very easily brushable. It's like, oh, land use is taken care of somewhere else. I think when we suggest subjects, it should be with a, broader preamble and a good justification why we think that particular that particular subject is important in terms of the sustainability and resilience. And that may take a little bit longer discussion. I don't know how to format that, but I'm just putting that out there. Thanks.
Daniel, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, Matthew, I appreciate what you're saying there about the need for dialogue and this kind of question of who leads and who goes first, in any given topic. I think on this one, though, it's starting to turn into a question of why city council is not taking the lead on this issue. Dissatisfaction in how land is being used in Longmont and how zoning is happening in Longmont um, is apparent in so many among city staff, among our community, among city council members in private. And so I think there's this question. He's like, yes, I appreciate Corkit your diplomacy and politeness here, but for the last year, every time we've raised this issue of land use, everyone around the table goes, yeah, this is an issue, this is a problem. And then nothing happens. And so what I would maybe encourage city council is that this is something we could take the lead on. But it seems like something that, especially since this spans multiple boards, our open space boards, our, of course, planning and zoning, it's not just us, it's several boards on this issue, that there's an obvious hole in the leadership here on this problem and this topic. And so as a member of an advisory board to city council, my advice to city council is it's long past due to get on this and start showing some leadership on the planning and zoning and land use issues that this community is trying to raise.
Sorry, just getting a spot where I can turn my camera on. Great points. And thank you for that feedback. I think actually where I'm coming from on this is more along the lines of where board member Onaran was actually getting to, which was land use is an extremely broad topic. And there are about 15,000 different directions you could potentially go here. And there are quite a lot of opinions, some of which are anchored more in the sustainability arena and some of which are not. And so I think understanding from this board which parts of the land use conversation SAB would like to plug into would be particularly helpful. I think that changes this from a sprawling scope, pardon the pun, to a bit more of a focused effort here of what does SAB feel like their place is in this conversation? To your point, Daniel, what is planning and zoning's role in this? What is Parks and Recreation Advisory Board's role in this? Right. And so now we're starting to think about the different advisory boards and their piece part of the process. And as I think we did discuss this summer, there are some broader master planning kind of directional notions that I think City Council is going to be moving toward to like operationalizing and taking another look at our comprehensive plan in the next year or two that this would likely feed into very appropriately. So I don't know if I would agree with your characterization that we have been ignoring that. I think there's just a time and a place to do that and do it cohesively. So just wanted to acknowledge all of that. But I think going back to the original point, for a productive and practical discussion, just to make this tangible, having this board say, hey, these are the parts of the land use conversation we would like to lean in on and we think are relevant here. I think that would be a really useful perspective for city council to have.
Okay. Good discussion, everybody. Ethan, go ahead.
So I put together a draft resolution, which basically is a request for Platte River to provide an update to council, the new council in January, about some of the rapid changes we're seeing in the energy sector, including federal orders and cost overruns. Those are the two main topics I address in the resolution, but there might be other topics as well. But I think it'd be important for the new council in particular to get updated about all these changes that are happening.
I just want to jump in here before there's further discussion, just so we don't go too far down a rabbit hole. I appreciate the spirit of your resolution and suggestion, Board Member Augreen. Keep in mind that this board advises City Council and does not direct Platte River Power Authority in any way, shape, or form. So just keep that in mind as you proceed with your discussion. Thank you.
Does anybody have any response to what Ethan shared or any comments or Daryl, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to jump in. Councilmember Popkins, right? It's kind of a convoluted series of steps to get to the point where you're asking Platte River staff to do something. I took a quick look at what he's proposing. It's pretty close to almost a full-blown IRP and an integrated resource plan in terms of, going back and reevaluating and recalculating a lot of those factors based on some of the most recent changes. I think it's a great question. I'd love to know the answers too, but there's just not enough time, especially not by January. I'd be surprised if Platte River, even if they were directed by the board and their general manager to embark on this, I'd be surprised if they could even get it done by January 2027. The IRP is a major undertaking. It does take a couple of years. From my perspective, it's an impossible ask.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Different topic. I
Go ahead,
just
Al.
wanted to see if anybody knew, based on the um, caller's question, Kristen, um, what acreage does the city of Longmont have of open space that could be agriculturally grazed? Anybody know?
Councilmember Popkin.
I was just gonna say,
He's looking at you, Lisa.
I was absolutely looking at you. I was just gonna say, like, just for context, we approved of just last night, 17 acres of new open space purchase, and that's a pittance. Uh,
Right.
so I mean, I'm hazarding a guess, we're probably in the thousands of acres somewhere
Would
there.
that would probably be an overlap
12,
with Boulder
12,
County
1300.
land, though, right?
12,
Which would be
1300. Thank
different.
you,
Yeah.
Becky. Yeah.
Yeah.
12 to 1300 of just city of Longmont open space, not Boulder County open space.
Correct.
Right. Okay. Yeah, we could do better. Yep. Good enough. That's all. I was just curious.
Yeah, just a note on that, board member Solomeo. We could do better. I mean,
We will.
we cannot expand our municipal boundary.
No, no, no.
So,
With the 12.
this is an extremely relevant discussion when we think about land use, right? And to
Right.
the other comment before, the other comments before, what is the appropriate balance of land use within the municipal footprint boundary that we cannot legally expand? Um, and how do we balance what is the appropriate land use within that footprint, versus like what the county would do outside of our footprint? So I won't opine on my personal perspective on that right now, but I will know that this is exactly why I was making that comment before of what direction, what role, and what focus does this board want to have in the land use conversation, is a large can of worms, and I'd love to know which flavor of gummy worm here you are most interested in honing in on, or
Gotcha.
flavors.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And then rules is the sustainability board, we're not allowed to meet other than in this online session, or are we allowed to study session as a whole? I know we can't study session as like a group of three or something because of like somebody be trying to dominate it or whatever, but um Heather,
Yeah, I
we
always like
allowed?
to defer to Heather on
Yeah.
rule interpretations. Um,
Yeah, so if you guys wanted to do like a subcommittee of two people, you could do something like that to delve into those type items, and then bring it back to the board. You're welcome to do that. If you have three or more, then that becomes an open meeting. But if you pair up and do it as a subcommittee of two or something, you're within your bounds to be able to do that.
And define open meeting, what does that mean? Like we'd have to record it. It'd have to be
It,
visible.
well, it'd have to be posted as a meeting for the board, and then anybody from the public would be able to attend, and we could record it or whatever. But if it's just like a work session that you all are doing, it would be better just to have a subcommittee of you to do that if you want to go that route.
Gotcha. Little subcommittees among subcommittees to encompass like land use to then
Sure.
report
Or
back to one
different topics
another.
that you want to delve into more. If you had a subcommittee that was looking into the regenerative agriculture, for example, and a different one that is looking at the land use kind of stuff, you guys are welcome to do that as work outside of our regular meetings, in addition to what we normally do.
Yeah, and just to build on what Heather was saying, this is a state law. This is not a city of Longmont procedure. This is a state law from an Open Meetings Act standpoint. And I am personally less concerned about someone dominating, more just making sure that we are holding transparent discussions when there's potential policy topics that are happening. So
Right.
the spirit of what Heather, I think the spirit of what you're getting at there, Board Member Philomeo, is.
Yeah, it's more just like these are big things, to
Mhm.
sit here in front of PRPA today, it's like, okay, like I'm all about it and I want to, but it would just take real homework and real study, which I know some of you all, some of us do professionally already in certain aspects. And yeah, obviously, if we put the energy and time into like combining what we all know, then we're probably, a nice, strong like transformer or whatever. Mhm. That's my
Corkit, I saw
opinion.
Ethan, your hand is still up from before, right? Or is there another? Okay. Corkit, did you have your hands up?
Yeah, I mean, uh, I'm an expert in land use and I can bring my perspective and share with the board. I suggested that in the past as well, or what aspects are, in my opinion, the most important and how practically we can address the zoning with those. I've been involved in different groups in creating these ideas, and There are some simple, in my mind, practical advices we can give, and if the board is interested, I can share those with you guys. Thank you.
Good, Daniel.
Yeah, I was curious. Maybe this is a question for Heather. Is there precedent or process for um, boards to work together on a process or to join together on so we're talking land use here, and I wonder, like, is that potentially a joint meeting between planning and zoning, sustainability, and open space to talk about X topic, or to hear from, to hear from Corkit, to have a single discussion that joins, three boards on the same topic?
Yeah, I think if you guys wanted to host a meeting or something like that, you could invite the other boards to attend as a joint meeting. We have had joint meetings between various boards in the past, so I don't see that that would be an issue.
I mean, because I feel like for me, it's like, how do you make the most action the fastest is like, let's pull all the people together who are interested in this topic, and get the ball rolling.
I'll just jump in for a second. I have seen relatively recent precedent of that. For instance, it wasn't exactly board to board. It was like the Children, Youth, and Families Department came over and spoke to the Senior Citizens Advisory Board, for instance. And so there's this cross-pollination here of ideas. I think that would be something I think council would very much welcome this board requesting. And I think because of the staffing involved in that, it would probably best be saying like, hey, we should probably sign off on that one, would be my recommendation. But if you think that's valuable, I'd say like make a motion, like propose a motion either today or in our next meeting, say that we would like to host that. I'll take that to council and just see if they have any concerns about that direction. That can happen pretty quickly too. Like that doesn't have to be a bureaucratic arm and leg here.
Yeah, I mean, can we just make that motion today, and then Matthew, you can take that to city council to put it on the agenda, or is that through Heather? Yeah, what's the fast route to make that happen?
Fastest would be for Councilmember Popkin to take that request to council.
Yeah, on our suggestion. So yeah, I mean, we can't move to make Matthew do something, right? So would we resolve to ask Matthew to do something?
I would encourage, I would simplify this a little bit,
Yeah.
so that it's not a personal directive, and just say that something like the Sustainability Advisory Board um, proposes to meet with the Planning and Zoning Commission and or other, like, list the boards that you're interested in,
Yeah.
and say that this you would like to propose a joint meeting on that, and then I'll take that to council. Like, I think that's pretty clean and straightforward, and I can easily share the report out from this discussion with my fellow council members on that.
I'd like to move to invite us to meet with I hear there's an open space board?
I think it's Parks and Recreation Advisory Board.
Yeah, I was typing through just to double check. Yeah,
Hang
the
with them too.
Parks and Recreation, Planning and Zoning, us, for those three for sure. But then can it just leave it as an open invitation? Any other boards that may want to participate to let us know and come on in?
We should meet with each one separately. That sounds like a lot.
Sorry, I think Daniel, you're trying to offer clarification, and Alec, you're trying to make a motion.
Yeah.
Let's. So, would you, or do you want to rescind that and like?
I mean,
yeah.
could rescind it, sure.
Well,
That's
no,
fine.
it sounded like you were asking how to.
Well, I was just going to
who you were
jump
trying
in
to
and say,
include,
yeah,
but
for me, it was the open space, or in this case, the Parks and Rec. So I would motion that at some point within the next 3 months, we, combine with them. That was the one. And then somebody else could do the other.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Alec, you're saying you're making a motion to meet with them separately. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I wouldn't be inclined to meet to do a combined meeting of Parks and
Well,
Rec.
we got a motion on the table.
Yeah,
So
as
we need
as a point of parliamentary
I see what
procedure
you're saying.
here,
Yeah.
there's a motion
Yes.
for discussion to happen. Someone needs to second it. Otherwise, it's a waste of everyone's time.
Yes. So is there a second for this motion? Second from Ethan. Okay. We haven't really debated this, so we'll have some a few minutes of discussion on this.
Before you go on, just a note of clarification. The
Yes.
motion on the table is that Alec moved that the Sustainability Advisory Board meet with the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board and other boards. Did you have other boards or just that one? Sometime within the next 3 months.
So it was just the Parks and Recreation Board, Alec, that make sure we understood that correctly. Oh, you're on mute. I'm sorry.
I'm open to saying all of them. I guess in my head, just less people together, more conversation can happen versus sort of like it being a party and there being 40 people who have never met before. So that was why I motioned for the one. In my
Okay,
personal,
so just
Okay,
for
so the motion is for
clarification, the
just that
motion
one.
is for Parks and Recreation Advisory Board
Correct.
sometime within the next 3 months.
if that timeline makes sense, I'm open to hear that it should happen within the next
Yeah,
month, whatever.
we can amend it if the group wishes to do that
And Ethan
throughout
seconded it.
discussion. Yes. Okay. Um, we got a lot of hands raised here. Ethan, I think I saw you like do the raise lower kind of thing, like you were ready to engage on this. So if you had something, go ahead.
I don't have much to say. I think it's a good idea. I've met with Prab to deliver public comment a few times, although I haven't had a full in-depth discussion with them, but I think they're good people. It'd be very interesting to talk with them.
Okay. Councilmember Popkin, I think you probably had some thoughts here.
Yeah, I want to offer a couple thoughts here because I think you're following kind of the right procedure here at this point. And what I'm not hearing is a clear agenda or a clear purpose for this. And so what I want to encourage folks to think about, and you could take, I don't want to tell you not to follow through on this motion today, but I could see a couple options here. One, you discuss what that agenda or purpose of that would be today. Or you say, hey, you know what, this is a good topic for the next meeting that we have. Let's have everyone think about this and come ready to discuss which topics for and paired with which boards, giving folks a chance to look at the board list, maybe think about that. I'm happy to meet with some folks individually because it can't be three or more. So I'm happy to meet with a couple of people on one-on-ones if you want to explore this more, if that would be helpful, or you can meet with each other one-on-one if that would be helpful for each other too. Then you could come back and have a more robust discussion about, hey, what are we actually trying to achieve with this? What is the purpose? What do we really want council to sign off on saying like this would be really productive, this would help with X, Y, and Z goals that we have? That's all I wanted
Thank
to
you.
offer. Thank you.
Jeff, go ahead.
I was really going to say what Matthew said, Council Member Matthew. I think it's nothing but great ideas. But if we need to discuss what we're going to talk about and have a clear approach before committing to a meeting, but it's an excellent idea. Just think we need to get our ducks in a row first. So I would say if I could offer to change the motion to instead of just having the meeting to putting an agenda item for us to discuss it next time.
Okay. Thank you for that comment. That was my parliamentary procedure is weak. I have not kept current. Like, are we allowed to have someone other than the original mover offer to amend the motion, or yeah, please?
So in this case, the process that this would follow, like what I'm gathering from board member Jeff, to return the first name privileges there, is that you were recommending a friendly amendment to for board member Alec's consideration here in this process. If that's amenable, then that can be just absorbed into the amendment, into the original motion. If not, it would be considered a separate motion. You'd have to rescind the first motion or withdraw that or vote on that and vote it down. Any one of those pathways would work. The most straightforward, if board member Alec agrees, would be to accept that as a friendly amendment, and then you guys would discuss that motion.
And we would have to discuss that alteration now, basically. Yeah. Basically, it would just change the.
So to clarify on the parliamentary
motion.
procedure, you wouldn't.
Thank you on this.
It
Sorry.
wouldn't be a debatable thing if it's offered as a friendly amendment and accepted as that from board member Alec. If he doesn't accept it as a friendly amendment, then you're still debating the original motion and the merits of that.
Okay.
It's a little bit of a
Okay.
kind of a barrel of
Well,
monkeys situation here.
so Jeff, let's confirm that was actually a proposal. And Alec, is that a friendly amendment? Or would you not like to? Is it
I
hostile?
believe I will not take the friendly amendment. I thank you anyway, Jeffrey, for the offer. Um, yeah, no, I just feel like within a month's time, again, I myself personally, again, especially with this one PRAP group, um, I've lived, yeah, 25 years wanting to talk to people in charge of the land of these different towns. So I would have plenty to conversate with them on. And again, my motion was only to motivate other motions to draw in zoning boards or right, whoever else wanted whatever else. But yeah, so if within the next 3 months, I'd feel confident we can put together a couple questions to figure out how and why we would benefit from a conversation with PRAP.
Okay. So as it is a hostile amendment, we will. I don't know what the opposite of friendly is here. Sorry. We'll 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 consider that as a separate motion after this one.
Just reminder to the board that there is no meeting in December because
Correct.
we have canceled that meeting, so the next available meeting would be January anyways.
Thank you, Heather. Corkit, go ahead.
I agree with Jeff and Council Member Popkin that we need to identify the questions and the issues that we're going to address. I mean, when we talk about open space, it's the use of open space and maybe productivity of the open space. But when we talk about land use, there are some other items like how complete our neighborhoods are, what kind of services we're providing, what kind of vulnerabilities we have with the single-use areas, et cetera, so forth. And it would make sense to really get through that list and then agree on them and then decide about with whom we're going to meet and what we're going to do. Because, planning and zoning, for instance, they just, I've been in planning and zoning commission and they just review. So they don't make the rules always. So depending on what we want to address, our audience changes. And that's why I would, encourage a discussion within the board. But at this point, I feel like it's a bit premature to go after different boards and without us knowing exactly what we're going to talk about. Thanks.
And I'll also weigh in that I have a similar opinion that I think our enthusiasm for this topic is ahead of our organization, and that we'd be best served by kind of gathering our thoughts and maybe huddling up so that we can ensure that time is most productive, and perhaps we create a mechanism for those other boards to bring forth what they think is relevant in response to what we think is relevant in advance as well. So I think there's some coordination there that's important that I don't think we are prepared to do well with. That's my thought. Okay, any other discussion on this before we vote on the motion? Daniel.
I agree with what everyone said, and then I also consider, the reality of our situation that this is a very slow moving machine we're all in. And so at the point of, so yes, we should come together, put together agenda. That's what, 2, 3 months process with those boards. And then setting the meeting, that's another 3 months, if not more than that. As we've seen with our own planning, right? Our topics, when they go onto the calendar, it takes 6 to 8 months to get to those topics to muster the resources to put it together. And so, while I appreciate what you're saying, it's like, yeah, we got to go into this with an agenda. What I wonder is if we should challenge ourselves and these other bollards to walk and chew gum and say, maybe we push it out 6 months instead of 3 months, but say, let's put this on the calendar. And before we get to that day, we got 6 months to put together an agenda. And we know what the topic is. It's land use in the city of Longmont. And to go to those boards and say what goes on that agenda with the question of land use. The alternative, of course, is for city council to step in and take the lead on this and say, yeah, here's what we've heard, here's the agenda, here's the boards that need to be a part of this. I think the hardest part with this is, it's hard for us to push this machine forward quickly, yeah, we can only meet two at a time and we have to go to, and the boards only meet once a month, right? And so you start to put that out, people getting sick, people not being there, and then, it takes us 2 years to do something, that, yeah, yeah.
Sorry.
I don't know. No, you're good. No, I'm starting to ramble anyway, so I appreciate that. So I'm just saying, it's like we're in a slow moving machine. We know what the topic is. It's land use. I'd suggest, yeah, that's where I'm at.
Thank you. Matthew.
That's board member Matthew to no, I'm just kidding. The board member Daniel, I would like to push back with on you a little bit respectfully here. And the part of the reason why I suggested originally that this board consider the specific agenda and the topics here is because if some of those align with council priorities, and in this case, I can't fully speak for council priorities because there's going to be a new group fully taking effect at the beginning of December. But if there's alignment, things can move fast. And I have seen that, and I'll speak from a point of someone who's been a board member of planning and zoning, and then now serves as a liaison to multiple boards through my council role. Things can move fast when there's alignment. And I think when there isn't alignment or isn't clarity, that's when things move slow. Because all of the folks who have their camera off right now are staff that report to all the way up the chain to city council eventually through our city manager. And part of the reason that, everything that you're talking about is a request on resources ultimately, right? Not just you, board member Daniel. Everything that this group and other boards are talking about is a request on resources. And our most valuable resources are actually our staff and the time. And so that's where things can move fast when stars align with the right boards, and I actually like the spirit of all of this, of trying to pull together multiple boards. And so in some ways, there might actually be value in setting what are the topics this board really wants to address so that we can see where there's alignment with other things that are percolating from other advisory boards already and from the new council. We could actually move that quite fast and operationalize our staff in a way to through clear direction so that there isn't guesswork, so there isn't ambiguity on why this is happening. So there is actual real value in trying to just align on the clear priorities. And I'll offer you one more thing. I'm really glad that you feel like there's alignment on land use. There are 6 strategies in the 185-page document of Envision Longmont. And those 6 strategies span livable centers, corridors, and neighborhoods, complete and balanced transportation, housing services, amenities, and opportunities for all, safe, healthy, and adaptable community, responsible stewardship of our resources, and job growth and economic vitality through innovation and collaboration. I think this board could make a claim to many of those topics, if not all of them. And that's not going to be well suited for a 1 2 hour meeting. And so I think you want to give some thought as to what are the topic or topics within land use, to board member Oneron's point originally, that this board feels particularly well suited and well interested and focused on. Offer that to city council and say, hey, we really want to spend some time this year. And then there's clear direction for our staff to support you, for the board to support each other, and for other boards to collaborate where appropriate. So I offer that. I think that actually would be quite efficient of a way to do this in a way that doesn't actually slow things down, but also doesn't just put meetings on the books for the sake of putting meetings on the books and hoping that they get scheduled. Right. And so that's where I respectfully dissent slightly, though I don't have a vote on this from the advisory board's perspective, but hoping to shape that you all to be as productive as possible in this conversation.
Yeah, I agree, I actually agree 100%, Matthew, and that's what I'm saying is that uh we're your advisory board. We're in 100% alignment with what you do. And so our issue here is we don't know what city council wants from us. And so that's when I say, to accelerate this forward, is like, yeah, we can go around and try to put together an agenda, throw it to city council and see if it aligns with city council's priorities. But I think, the quick process here is to know, yeah, where can we be helpful in land use? Where can that direction come from? It's a little bit like I hear what you're saying, but it feels a little bit of being asked to lead from behind, which we can do. It's just going to take us more time than to say, Matthew comes to us and say, here's the 4 areas of land use and sustainability we need your advice on, and let's get that ball rolling, versus us saying, here's the 4 priorities we have, and city council says, well, That's not in alignment because the advice you're giving us is the advice we've already gotten, and this conversation hasn't moved forward. And so I'm wondering how we break this gridlock we're in, where I mean, before us, Mary Lynn, I swear she'd get so frustrated. She was on this board for years wanting to talk about regenerative agriculture, land use, and nothing ever moved forward. And the advice was always this: put together agenda. What do you want to do? Let's put it on the years, let's put it on the next calendar cycle. And so I'm looking for a way to break through that. And I think there's city council is what unites everyone, and we're all aligned with what city council needs from us. And so if there's movement from city council, that's a train we can all get on.
So I'll just clarify there. Normally, I would feel a little bit more comfortable speaking for city council, but there's a new group coming in 3 weeks. So I don't want to get too far out in front respectfully to my colleagues there, given that transition. But I think if they're perhaps to productively advise the advisory board here, I might suggest for those who are less familiar, or I know some folks are intimately familiar with our land use plans, others are probably less so. And so I would encourage this group to think about what's the most productive way for this group to figure out how you can engage on certain topics, because it could turn out that each of you care about a different topic within Envision Longmont to begin with, or within our land use code. And then I don't know where you all want to start. And I mean, the new city council could provide some direction to P&Z and to Sustainability Advisory Board and to Parks and Recreation Advisory Board too. Um, I will, I will just share one thing I'm taking from this conversation is that there's a desire for boards to work together on multiple intersecting issues. And I think actually Sustainability Advisory Board has a little bit more command of intersectional issues than some of the other boards across our city. But let me definitely report that back at a minimum, regardless of where these motions go, because that's kind of the theme I'm hearing from this discussion at a minimum. And then if the issue of land use or the topic of land use overall is particularly of interest, um, I don't want to, I don't know exactly how to guide the group to figure out which focus within that you're most interested in. But if there were two or three particular topics of interest, that would be where I would then say, like, it would be helpful direction for city council to be aware of that this is what this board would like to grapple with and would like to explore, so you can provide these kinds of findings back to city council so that we can decide kind of how we want to proceed from there.
Can I jump in there?
Lisa, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm sorry, I'm going to acknowledge I am very exhausted and fading quickly from two very long, very exciting days. But so if I say something that doesn't make sense, please ask for clarification. And I want to acknowledge that it's 6:30, so I'm going to go quickly. Understanding we don't have a meeting in December. In January, I do want to make sure we have time to set aside to set a work plan or schedule for the year to both what Councilmember Popkin and Board Member Daniel just said, and this kind of tension that we're in, and tying it back to Corkett's offer that he's brought to the table several times. I wonder if, Corkett, you would be willing between now and our January meeting, look at Envision, look at indicators that talks about where we're at with a lot of the work in the Envision Comprehensive Plan that Councilmember Popkin just mentioned, and you and I can touch base in between then. But if you're willing to bring your expertise to review that and bring some thoughts to what Councilmember Popkin just mentioned to help us refine where we might land in terms of topic areas that are well aligned and well suited to the mandate of this board, then I think that allows us to have some robust conversation in the meantime, leaning on the expertise of someone that we have in this board. So we're not kicking the can, because it is going to be a while, even with the new council members. Hopefully they'll have a council retreat. They're going to have a special election to fill Mayor Hidalgo Faring's seat. So I don't want to drag this out, hearing that you all want to get into this conversation. So if that sounds like a solution that brings a few of these things together, and Corkett, if you're willing to do that, that might be at least a starting point for us for January. I hope that
Sure, I
makes
would love to
sense.
do that. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
All right. Any other last minute quick hits before we take a vote on this motion? I think we've heard from almost everybody. Okay.
Just want to
Then
recommend that when you all talk about that, it would be a good idea if you guys could figure out a few dates that could be posed to the other boards that you would want to meet with, so that we would be able to find a time more easily too, because just setting a date does not mean that the other boards would be able to necessarily attend. So that might be something to think about as well.
thanks, Heather. Okay, well, we've got Alex's motion on the table, which Heather, can you restate it again? We've debated a lot and talked about a lot. Can you remind
Yeah,
us?
so the motion is that the Sustainability Advisory Board would meet with the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board sometime within the next 3 months.
Okay. Well, all those in favor?
I don't even know anymore.
2. Okay. And all those opposed? Is that 5? Okay. The motion fails. But thank you. It was a great discussion. Are there any other items, recognizing that it is 6:30 and we did kind of make a plan for Corkit to help drive this issue forward, even though we didn't take the Alex recommended approach? I'm not seeing any hands raised, so I think we should move on and close the items from the board and move to items from council. Do you have anything for us?
I do. I wanted to share a couple things. First of all, I apologize I couldn't make the last meeting, but I just wanted to share a couple topics that council discussed over the last month or two for this board's awareness on different topics, just for different categories of topics altogether, as you start to think about kind of what topics within land use or other considerations you're interested in discussing in the next year. First thing, I guess I'll work backwards. So just last night, we approved multiple agreements with some regional transit providers, including one that goes from the Flex Ride that goes down from Fort Collins to CU Boulder through Longmont, and one or two things with RTD, actually more than two things with RTD, including but not limited to kind of an update to Ride Longmont, our ride share, and $16 million developer agreement with, or no, it's a developer agreement that's leveraging $16 million of RTD funding for the Park and Ride Garage at First and Main. That's planned for that. That's planned as the kind of future transit center for Longmont. So those were just approved last night. The transit center is going to the next phase. There will be kind of initial design for that initial phase of construction. Also last night, let me pull up my notes. We approved, speaking of land use topics, two amendments to two of the urban renewal areas that we have in the city. So there's the Twin Peaks Mall urban renewal area, which is basically the greater Village of the Peaks area. We approved an amendment to that to allow to capture some of the redevelopment financing for a new housing complex that's going to go at Nelson and Hover. And that will feed into kind of that's like an infill brownfield redevelopment. And then on the other side of the city, we approved an amendment to the Southeast Urban Renewal Area, which includes favorite icons like the Sugar Mill-ish, like adjacent areas, because that's technically not in the city of Longmont right now. That's a Boulder County enclave. But that Sugar Mill region all the way over to kind of where the future transit station is going to be. It's a fairly long urban renewal area. The maps of those are on the council packet from last night's agenda, if you are curious, or you can email me directly, and I'm happy to share that with you. That amendment was intended to basically capture some more of the redevelopment financing for expanded infrastructure investments in those specific areas. Again, more infill brownfield development. So just when we think about the topic of land use, a lot of stuff, even just within those couple items right there, right? And then a couple weeks ago, when was this? I think this was a combination of last night and I believe the beginning, I guess it was the end of October. The city used the sustainability evaluation rubric matrix for the first time for a riparian setback variance. If you don't know what all of those words mean, let me see if I can break that down. So, the riparian setback is the like a river corridor and other waterway corridor ecosystems. The setback means the distance that something can be built from that corridor. And the sustainability evaluation scoring rubric is a planning mechanism that, while it's not technically enforceable, it helps evaluate the sustainability benefits across a whole host of topics, from stormwater to heat island to um, wildlife protection, like all of those topics. Um, and it scores kind of a request, whether it's for a development or, in this case, a variance, an exception to the rule. Um, I believe we applied that, used that for the first time since it was created about 6 years ago. So if you're curious to learn more about that as well and see, I mean, it was a detailed rubric. Our planning and sustainability staff actually did a really robust job of looking at the different pros and cons from what was originally proposed versus what was proposed to be changed. And so if you're looking at kind of that side-by-side comparison, you can actually see what the developer or the applicant scored themselves as on that rubric and what staff scored themselves as. And then City Council used that to actually inform our decision on a conditional amendment and approval for that variance. So a lot of process and a lot of things there, but basically we're applying a new sustainability toolkit basically to or newly applying a thing that has been around for a little bit to this type of proposal. Even that is somewhat of a land use consideration because it touches on how a development can request a variance in that situation. So just sharing kind of the range of topics we can get into and how quickly we can get deeply into something. And then the last thing, through our budget process this year, one of the topics that came up repeatedly was on, and I actually led some of this push, was to focus on our waste fees and rates. Um, and we set rates for trash, recycling, and compost. And I actually questioned why we were just doing cost of service increases for each of those, basically saying, oh, we're going to just increase it to meet the operational costs versus a policy. If our policy is to try to increase composting or increase recycling, shouldn't we be thinking about our rate structure in that way? So we had a fairly extensive debate at the end of our budget season. Again, that was probably end of October as well. Um, or maybe that was November 3rd, um, as to how we wanted to approach rates. There was discussion, basically agreement from council to accept this year's rate, but rather than kind of approve a 3-year rate increase, think of reevaluate that policy in early next year. So that might actually be something that comes before this board if the new council wants to send that topic this way to think about how does our waste fee structure impact kind of the goals or relate to the goals that we have. So just wanted to put a few of those kind of fairly meaty topics on the table for what kind of has come up in the last 2 months. Happy to take a few questions, recognizing that we're almost at time here, but just wanted to put those on the radar. More than happy to follow up with people individually too.
Any comments, questions? All right. Well, it was a good, concise update there. That no follow-up.
Very few
All right.
people would agree that was concise.
A lot of topics. Well done. Okay. Well, in your board packet, there was information there. We don't need to talk about it, but make sure you reviewed it. Before we adjourn, our next meeting is January the 21st. It's in person, so no meeting in December. We'll meet in person in 2 months. So that is everything on our agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Okay, thank you, Corkett. Is there a second?
Sure, I'll second.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, all those in favor of the motion to adjourn? All right, I think that's everybody. All right, meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for all your engagement tonight and for sticking out for a late meeting. I hope everyone has a great close to the year and looking forward to seeing you in January.
Yeah, hey, have great holidays, everyone. We'll see you in the new year.
Thank you all.
Take care.
Bye.